Welcome back, everyone. Now, in this lesson, I want to talk about the compositions. Now, the compositions are your main canvas, right? Where you're drawing, making everything that you're animating will be happening and in your composition. Now, without the composition, your timeline is not activated. So, what is a way to create a composition? Well, you either clicking on this button here that mentions create a new composition. You can go at the top here in the menu and say new composition, or as the shortcut clearly indicates, you can click Control N on your keyboard and it will create a new composition. Now, while you're in this here dialog box, a couple of things that are very important to mention. Now, the first one is how you're going to call your composition. So you can leave it at comp1, but mainly it's very important to name it with your correct naming what you're working on. So if this is the main scene, you can call it the main scene. Now the presets here you have by default is what After Effects is giving you and kind of like trying to understand what you're going for. So you can create any of the presets here if you're working in a standard software, actually in a standard resolution that will be used on TV or on YouTube or whatever. If you're working on an non-standard resolution or something that's custom or very specific, you can change your resolution here and add any number you like. Now, for example, 1920 by 1080 is considered full HD in an aspect ratio that will be 16 by 9. If you're making a reel, for example, for Instagram, you can switch these two and now you're going to have a composition that's going to be vertical. Whatever it is, this is where you can change this. Now, in 90% of the time, you will keep this in square pixels, right? You're not going to change this because these different type of aspect ratios define how your pixels are shown on the screen, if they're stretched or not, and so on. So without going into too many details regarding the aspect ratios here, remember to keep it to square pixels most of the time. Your frame rate is going to be 24 because I've set this in my preferences to be 24, but you can select any from the dialog box here, or you can input directly the one that you want here, or the one that you're using. And the resolution, well, I like to keep this at quarter. This is going to downgrade my resolution of the composition itself, not the final project that I'm rendering. And you can select the duration of your composition. I like to keep it at 5 seconds, give or take. And background color, you can choose any color you like. I keep it on gray because black is too dark or white will be too bright. So gray for starters is good for me. And then when you click OK, it's going to create your composition. Before going to the creation of the composition, I want to show you what this advanced stands for. Now, here the advanced will change a couple of things that are related to the motion blur, okay, and to the anchor point. Now, the anchor point is grayed out for a reason. I'm just not going to go too much in detail here. The one that is important here is the motion blur because it pertains to how the objects are moving on the screen and how this deformation is going to be tackled by After Effects. Now, the motion blur looks different depending on what your final, let's say, usage of After Effects is, but this is for an advanced class, so I would leave it at that. Leave it on default and it's going to look really good. And then the 3D renderer is what determines the features that are available for your 3D layers in the composition and how these 3D features interact with the 2D layers. As far as I'm concerned, you're not going to be using Cinema 4D, which is a software for creating 3D elements and assets that play very well with After Effects. Leave it on Classic 3D for now and everything should be great. Now, when you click OK, it's going to create a composition for you. And here is my composition. Now, notice one thing is because I've stayed in 1080 by 1920, it gave me a composition that's, for example, very good in its format for a reel on Instagram, as an example. Now, my current time indicator is activated. What we call the CTI is this blue little icon that you can left click and grab. And what you will notice is that the time is changing here and here, the time code. So you will be able to navigate within your composition by moving it left and right. So your timeline is activated. Now, talking about the timeline is in another lesson. One thing I like to do here is just to say, once your composition is created, what you can do is by holding space on your keyboard and left mouse button, you will be able to move your composition left and right. You can control plus and zoom in, control minus to zoom out, or if you have a mouse, you can click your middle mouse button and roll it to zoom in. The important thing is the space bar and left mouse button to move around. Regarding the composition, okay, you will notice that here you can change the from quarter back to, let's say, third half full or automatic if you want to. This is how much you want your composition to fit to the screen as well, and you will have a bunch of options here that we will be talking about later on in terms of what each of these are specifically doing. You will see in another lesson. But for now, remember, once you've created your composition, it's a good idea to drop it into your folder called compositions. So this way it resides where it's supposed to be, in the composition folder. That's it for this lesson. I'll see you in the next one.